22 years wearing a badge. 22 years standing in rooms after the worst thing that could happen to a person had already happened, and I never once put my hands on anyone in anger. Then a man grabbed my daughter's hair across a dinner table, and his mother clapped for him like he'd scored a touchdown, and I had to decide, in about 4 seconds, whether everything I'd learned in 2 decades of homicide work still meant anything. My name is Walter Briggs. I'm 59 years old, retired from the Charlotte Police Department, Homicide Division, after 22 years on the job. I'm telling you this because what happened at that restaurant taught me something I didn't expect to learn this late in life: that the quietest response can be the most devastating one, if you build it right. Let me back up first. My daughter, Emma, is 31. She has her mother's laugh and my stubborn streak, which has served her well and occasionally gotten her in trouble. 4 years ago, she married a man named Colin Ashford in a ceremony out in Huntersville that cost more than any 2 cars I've ever owned. I walked her down the aisle. I gave a toast. I meant every word. Colin is 34. He manages a logistics team for a freight company called Bridgeport Distribution out of their Concord office. Drives a truck he's never once used for hauling anything. He's got a handshake built for first impressions and eyes that never quite match whatever he's saying. The first time I met him, I thought, this one's been practicing his smile in a mirror. I kept that to myself. Should have said it out loud. His mother is Sheila Ashford, 63, who runs a licensed home daycare in Harrisburg called Little Sprouts, caring for about 18 kids between 2 and 5 years old. She's loud in a way people mistake for warmth, and she'd been wedging herself into Emma and Colin's marriage since roughly the second week of their honeymoon. The three of us, me, Emma, Colin, and Sheila, were at Miller's Chop House on Weddington Road, a Saturday evening in early October, celebrating Emma's birthday. I made the reservation. I ordered the appetizers. I was 2 glasses into a Cabernet when the argument started. It started quiet, the way arguments do between 2 people who have had this exact fight before and both already know the ending. Colin brought up Emma spending the previous weekend at my place, helping me sort through her late mother's belongings, something I've been chipping away at slowly since Margaret passed 2 years ago. Colin apparently had opinions about that. I was watching the way 22 years of detective work trains you to watch. Emma's shoulders drew in. Colin's jaw tightened. And Sheila was watching the whole exchange with an expression I can only call interested. Then Colin reached across the table, not for her hand. He grabbed a fistful of Emma's hair at the base of her neck and yanked, hard enough that her head snapped sideways, hard enough that people at the next table turned to look. Emma's eyes filled instantly. She didn't cry out. She just went still, the way something goes still after it's been caught. And Sheila leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, looking at her son with actual pride, and said, "That's how it's done." She needs to learn her place. Every instinct I had, every reflex built from 20 years of standing between people at their absolute worst, wanted to put my hands on Colin Ashford right there. I won't pretend otherwise. But here's what homicide work teaches you. The angriest response in a critical moment almost never wins. I'd watched it 100 times across an interview table. The guilty man who stays composed walks out. The furious man who explodes gets charged. So my hand didn't move toward Colin. It moved to my jacket pocket. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and hit record. Neither of them noticed. The phone just sat there on the table, screen toward them, casual as a water glass. I let it run for 40 seconds. Colin's face, Emma's tears, Sheila's smile, all of it clean and well lit. Then I set the phone down, folded my napkin, and said, "Check, please," not loud. The voice I used to use right before an arrest, when everything needs to stay calm until the cuffs are on. Colin blinked. "We haven't even gotten our entrees." "Check, please." I paid for everything, including his rabbi that never showed up. I stood, looked at my daughter. "Get your coat, honey." Something in my face made her pick it up without a word. Colin started to argue. I looked at him once, no expression, the same face I used to wear in interrogation rooms, and said, "Enjoy the rest of your evening." I walked my daughter out of that restaurant and into my truck. She was shaking. I wasn't. If you're new here, this is a channel for stories about ordinary people who got pushed too far and found a quieter, smarter way to fight back. Stick around, it's worth it. And if you like where this is headed, go ahead and hit subscribe now, because it only gets better from here. We sat in that parking lot for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the dashboard clock the way I used to track long stakeouts, not impatient, just counting. Emma didn't speak for the first 4. Then Dad don't do anything. Already did something. What did you do? I recorded it. Silence. Then has he done that before? She stared out the window. Not like that. Not in public. The specific qualifier of someone who's spent a long time sorting acceptable from unacceptable and forgetting what normal even feels like. How long, Katie? Emma. How long? She finally answered. About a year and a half. It's not always physical. Mostly it's yelling things he says. The hair thing maybe 5 times. 5 times. 5 times someone had grabbed my daughter's hair, and she never told me because she knew exactly what I'd do, and she'd spent a year and a half protecting him from me, or protecting me from myself, or protecting a marriage she still thought she could save. I put my hand over hers. Here's what happens now. You're coming home with me tonight. Tomorrow I make some calls. You don't have to do anything yet. Just let me work. Dad, I don't want this to get. Emma. I waited until she looked at me. He grabbed your hair in front of 40 people, and his mother told you it was deserved. It already got there. One small, exhausted nod. The nod of a woman who'd been tired for 18 months and was only now admitting it. We drove to my place in North Concord. I made tea. She fell asleep on the couch under Margaret's old throw blanket. I sat at the kitchen table and watched that video 4 times to make sure I had exactly what I thought I had. I did. Then I made 2 calls. First, to Marcus Doyle, my partner for 11 of my 22 years, retired now and running security consulting out of Charlotte. He picked up on the second ring because Marcus never lets a call go to voicemail. "It's 11 o'clock, Walt. I've got video of Colin Ashford assaulting Emma at a restaurant tonight." Whole room saw it. A pause. "How bad?" Hair pulled clear on camera. Her reaction too. "You filed a report yet?" "Tomorrow." "Wanted to call you first." "Good." His voice shifted the way mine does from friend to professional. "Who's your family law contact?" "Nathan Pierce downtown. Call him before 9. He needs to know before Colin's attorney does." A beat. "Walt, you didn't touch him." "Didn't need to." "Good. Keep it that way." The second call went to Nathan Pierce's emergency line, a family law attorney I'd known 12 years since a domestic case where my evidence work helped his client. Careful, thorough, hard to surprise. "Nathan, it's Walter. I need an emergency consult first thing tomorrow. Video evidence of assault on my daughter, multiple witnesses, and the mother-in-law is on camera cheering it on." "What restaurant?" "Miller's Chop House. Weddington Road. They have cameras, they do." 8 a.m. My office. I sat at that kitchen table a long time, listening to Emma breathe under Margaret's blanket. I didn't know yet how much work that 40-second video was about to do. I didn't know Sheila Ashford's smile on camera was about to cost her something she'd spent 30 years building. And I didn't know Colin, so sure of himself in that booth, was 3 days from the worst week of his professional life. I made coffee and started a list. A detective doesn't win by being the loudest person in the room. You win by building something fact by fact, document by document, until the other side has nowhere left to stand. Colin thought Saturday was just an argument that got a little out of hand. He figured Monday he'd be back running his team at Bridgeport like nothing happened. He thought Sheila would call Emma Tuesday and smooth it over with a little guilt, the way she always did. He was wrong on all three counts. Sunday morning I was in Nathan's office at 8 sharp. He'd already pulled up Miller's Chop House, full security system, standard for a place at that price point. North Carolina is a one-party consent state for recording, so my video was fully admissible. I played it for him. He watched it twice, paused it right on Sheila's face at the exact moment she spoke, and looked at me over his glasses. "Walter, this is a gift." The mother-in-law encouraging it on camera. "I've never had that in 20 years of practice." "Neither have I," he leaned back. "Here's what we build. Emergency protective order for Emma I can file today. Criminal referral to Cabarrus County PD since the restaurant's in their jurisdiction. You'll need to file that report yourself." He paused. "What does Colin do for work?" "Manages a team at Bridgeport Distribution." "Out of their Concord office." Most mid-size logistics companies carry a conduct clause, behavior that damages the company's reputation, domestic violence charges included. "I've got an HR contact who can walk us through it," he kept writing. "And the mother runs a licensed daycare in Harrisburg, 18 kids ages 2 to 5. He set his pen down. "Walter, do you understand what the state's Child Care Licensing Division is going to do with a video of a licensed provider encouraging domestic violence on camera?" I had an idea. I wanted him to say it anyway. "That's a mandatory review. They'll open a fitness investigation into her license. Parents of all 18 kids will be notified." "Build it," I said. "All of it." "How's Emma?" "Scared, steady. She still wants to protect the marriage." "That's common," Nathan nodded slowly. "I did 6 years of straight domestic work before switching to family law. I've seen every version of this. What I also know," I said, "is that a documented pattern going back 18 months, plus this video, plus a protective order, gives Emma options she doesn't think she has right now. I'm not forcing her hand. I'm building her a door." He looked at me for a moment, then nodded once, the nod of a man who just decided he was all in. That afternoon I drove to the Cabarrus County Police Station and filed the report. The officer, a young guy named Dan Ruiz, watched the video twice and filled out every line like a man who'd had good training. "You were a detective, Mr. Briggs, 22 years. This is strong. Public setting, multiple witnesses video. Will request Miller's security footage. You want the full process." "The full process. Let the law do its job." Monday morning I made Emma breakfast, eggs, toast, the orange juice she's liked since she was 7, and let her talk. About the first time. About how each incident on its own had seemed survivable, which is how these things stay hidden for a year and a half. She showed me her phone, 14 months of texts she'd never deleted. Colin's messages after each incident, apologies that were really instructions, affection that was really surveillance. "I love you, but you made me do that," the quiet architecture of blame. I photographed every screen. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, not as an accusation, just wanting to know. "Because I knew what you'd do." "What did you think I'd do?" "Go after him." I waited until she looked up. "Look at what I did instead." Something shifted across her face, not quite a smile. "You took out your phone." "I took out my phone, and now I'm building something." "Is it going to work?" I poured her more juice. "But Emma, none of this matters if you go back to him." "I can build the door, I can't walk you through it." Long silence. "Mom would have hated him," she finally said, almost to herself. "Your mother had excellent instincts. If stories like this one are keeping you company, it really helps if you hit that like button before you keep going. It costs nothing, and it's the only reason this channel keeps growing. Thank you, genuinely." 4 days after the dinner, 3 things happened in order. First, Nathan called at 9 to confirm the emergency protective order had been granted that morning. Colin was legally barred from contacting Emma. He'd been served at his Concord office at 8:45 by a process server, whose only comment to Nathan was that Colin's face went slack the second he read the paperwork. Second Officer Ruiz called at 10:30. Cabarrus County had reviewed Miller's security footage, which matched my video from a second angle, and issued a warrant for Colin's arrest on misdemeanor battery. He turned himself in through his attorney by noon, posted bail, and was out by 2. The charge was now on his record. Third, at 3:15 that afternoon, I got a voicemail from a woman identifying herself as an investigator with the state's Child Care Licensing Division. They'd received a complaint referral about Sheila Ashford and Little Sprouts Daycare, and were opening a fitness review. I sat with my coffee and listened to it twice, thinking about Sheila leaning back in her chair at Miller's with her arms crossed. That's how it's done. She needs to learn her place. 18 families in Harrisburg were about to get a letter. The most satisfying moment in any case isn't the arrest. It's the moment the other side realizes the game ended 3 moves ago, and they were the last to find out. Colin got that moment the following Thursday, placed on administrative leave from Bridgeport pending an internal HR review. Nathan's HR contact had simply notified the company's legal department that an employee had been arrested for battery with video evidence. Not a threat. Just information they'd want before it hit local news. Bridgeport's conduct policy had exactly the clause Nathan predicted. Colin was escorted out by 9 a.m. He called Sheila from the parking lot. I know because he accidentally forwarded his attorney's timeline email to Emma's old personal address, one he'd forgotten she still checked. People under pressure make small, catastrophic mistakes. Emma drove herself over that afternoon with the printout. New, since 4 days earlier she'd been shaking in a restaurant parking lot. He's on leave. His attorney's saying I ran a coordinated campaign against him. She looked up. That's us, that's us. Is that even legal what you did with his job with Sheila's daycare? I reported a crime. I gave evidence to the right licensing people. I hired an attorney to protect your rights. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. She was quiet. Sheila called me, said I needed to get my father under control. Then she laughed and said I was lucky Colin loved me as much as he did. What did you say? I hung up. She looked at me. An expression like someone who'd driven a long way in the wrong direction and just now realized where she actually was. I hung up and I drove here. The next 2 weeks moved the way solid investigative work moves, not dramatic, just steady, each piece locking into the next. Nathan filed for divorce on Emma's behalf that Monday, irreconcilable differences, documented domestic violence, active protective order. Colin's attorney fired back an aggressive counterfiling within 4 days, the legal equivalent of a man puffing out his chest because he has nothing else. Nathan wasn't rattled. He had the video, the police report, the arrest, the texts, and 14 months of incidents Emma and I documented together over 3 mornings at my kitchen table. Dates and photos and 2 bruises she'd captured on her phone and never shown a soul until now. Colin's attorney went quiet after receiving the full package, a very specific silence, one I'd heard plenty of times before. It's the sound of a legal strategy being completely rebuilt from nothing. Sheila's fitness review moved on its own clock. Investigators interviewed her, reviewed the video, talked to staff, confirmed the incident with Miller's Chop House. 18 days after that birthday dinner, letters went to all 18 families enrolled at Little Sprouts, informing them of the active review and their right to more information. One parent posted about it in a local Harrisburg group. By the following morning, 11 of 18 families had pulled their kids. By the next week, Little Sprouts had 7 children left. Sheila called Emma 3 more times. Emma didn't answer. The one voicemail she let play mentioned your father 11 times and never once contained the words "I'm sorry." If you've stuck with this story this far, do me one favor, subscribe. It costs nothing, and it's genuinely what keeps this channel alive. Thank you. 23 days after the dinner at Miller's, Colin accepted a settlement through his attorney. Uncontested divorce, assets split per North Carolina law, a permanent restraining order replacing the emergency one. No custody fight, they had no kids. Colin kept his half of the joint accounts and the furniture he'd brought into the marriage. Emma kept everything else, including the condo she'd furnished herself and her freedom, which was worth considerably more than any of it. His attorney, after reading Nathan's full documentation package, had apparently told Colin in no uncertain terms that contesting this divorce in a courtroom, with that video and that arrest record, was not a fight he was going to win. Nathan called the moment the countersignatures came through. Done. It's over, Walter. How's the Bridgeport situation? He resigned Friday, right before they could finish the termination process. Same outcome, different paperwork. And Sheila, no set timeline on the state review. But losing 11 families in a week, that's part of the record now. That afternoon Emma came by with a bottle of wine. Something she gets from Margaret's side of the family. The belief that big moments deserve something decent in a glass. She also brought a small plant in a terracotta pot and set it on my windowsill. It needed something living in it, she said. How do you feel? I asked her once we'd sat down. She thought about it honestly, the way she always does. Tired, sad, a little scared about what's next, a pause, and relieved. Like I've been carrying something for a year and a half and finally put it down. We talked for 2 hours about nothing important, her job, Thanksgiving at her new place, Margaret's old blanket, which Emma wants to keep, which is fine by me. At one point she looked at me with something half curious, half harder to name. Dad, that night in the parking lot you could have gone back in there. I could have. You didn't. Why? I've known the answer since I was 23 years old, when a training sergeant of mine told me something I never forgot. Because hitting him would have felt good for about 45 seconds, and then I'd have been arrested, and the whole story becomes about me instead of you, and he walks. A retired cop's assault charge versus video of him assaulting you, which one actually helps my daughter, she nodded slowly. The video? I picked up my phone instead of my fists because the phone was going to do more damage than my hands ever could. That's not patience, that's math. She raised her glass. To doing the math, to doing the math. By the end of that month, Colin was unemployed, living back at his mother's house in Harrisburg. Sheila's daycare had 7 kids left and an open state review hanging over it. Nathan's office sent over the finalized divorce decree with a note that just said clean. I filed it in the cabinet between Emma's birth certificate and her college diploma. Everything that matters, kept in the same place. Then I went and watered the plant on the windowsill. It's doing fine, for the record. Margaret always said I had no business keeping anything alive. Turns out I just needed something worth keeping. So that's the story. If you'd been sitting at that table, what would you have done in the moment? Said something, walked out, or done exactly what I did and let the evidence do the talking? Let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from tonight. If this one hit for you, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.